Greetings, friends in isolation. Greeting, Rickus, also in isolation. Welcome to Living the Dram. ISO cast number 2.
Ronacast.
Ronacast Especial.
Apparently you shouldn't talk too much about it because YouTube, now that they scan the audio content, if you're talking about Kona, they'll bump your way down the list. Right. I probably just got us bumped already by telling you to not mention it. Fantastic stuff.
So go looking for us right down the bottom.
Yeah.
But we're
apparently it hurts your ratings because they don't want people giving out false advice.
Well, we're not going to give out false advice. We're just going to give out the best advice, which is drink whiskey and enjoy it.
What's what was it? Winston Churchill's secret remedy? Whiskey.
It should be everyone's secret.
No,
remedy,
you can't.
really.
You can't remember what it was. We said it in one episode. What did he call it? It was Johnny Walker Red. Was his?
That's right. Fuck.
That's all right. Go listen to the Johnny Walker Blue versus Chivas Regal Altus. I think it's in there.
Which was our last ISOcast.
That's funny. Yeah, peculiar. Well done.
But we're not doing a Battle of the Blends today. We're doing a
new kid on the block.
It is a new kid on the block.
Yeah, it's only been around for a couple of years in the Australian market.
And it looks reasonable just by looking at it. There's some nice colour to it. But do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're sampling today, Rickus?
Yes, we've decided to try the Aerstone 10-year-old. They come in 2 varieties. You've got a sea cask and a land cask. Brought to you by William Grant and Sons.
It's pretty interesting, the separation of cask there, isn't it? It's the marketing. The marketing stuff looks like they're trying to make it a little bit simpler for newcomers to whiskey. I don't know if that'll actually work out for them, but it's a novel concept.
Yeah, why not? Have a go, by all means, I say. Whether it's one thing to differentiate the taste, but if the whiskey's piss, then you failed. So
correct,
yeah,
absolutely, and we will absolutely tell you if the whiskey is piss.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of our shtick. So you're right. It's from William Grant and Sons, who, they're giants. Realistically, they've got several global brands, including the Glenfiddich, which is still the world's best-selling single malt whiskey.
They're the 3rd largest producer of Scotch whiskey behind Diageo and Pernod Ricard, who are in 1 and 2 respectively.
The other brands that they have are the Belveni, Govan, Monkey Shoulder, Tullamore Dew, Sailor Jerry Spiced Rum, Milagro Tequila, and Hendrick's Gin. So all of those are pretty well-known names. Yeah,
I just focused on their whiskey portfolio, which has also got Glenfodry, Grant's, Kinninvie, Monkey Shoulder, I think you might have said that, Clan McGregor, House of Hazelwood, and the Gordon Highlanders.
Which are probably lesser-known brands, and most of them are blends as well.
Some of them would be blends, for sure.
But I've got a little bit of... let's start with the Aerstone. It's...
I was going to say a bit about the distillery that it comes from. Did you find any?
Yeah, well, and that's it. I mean, it's kind of an interesting one because it comes from the Ailsa Bay Malt Distillery.
Yeah, no... On the packaging, however, there is nothing. There's just an allusion to Girvan. Just says that's on the website, that it just comes from Girvan Distillery.
And the Ailsa Bay Distillery is on the Girvan estate, basically.
Yeah.
There's a number of distilleries in Girvan. So I've got a little bit of history here for Girvan, and I've got a little bit of information on Ailsa Bay in particular as well. But do you want to start us off?
Just as I was saying, the exact distillery that produces the new make is undisclosed, but everybody believes, and I'd say with good reason, that it comes from Ailsa Bay Distillery.
Yep.
which is, it's right next door to Girvan. The reason, after a quarrel between the Grant family and DC, Girvan Distillery was built to supply grain whiskey to its blended brands, and it was just great. Named after the town. The distillery it's known as one of the most energy efficient in Scotland, and it's also the home of Hendrick's Gin. Ailsa Bay is incorporated into the site, and that was opened by the Duke of Rothesay himself, HRH Prince Charles, in 2009.
And we all know that DCL back in the day is what Diageo has come to be. So I found that really interesting as well, that it was a wrangle, which is a great word. It's an underused word. I love it. But, so it basically came about because Grants had decided to run a TV ad for its Stand Fast brand on commercial television.
Yeah, right.
And DCL, which is now Diageo, took umbrage to this show of, this is a quote, took umbrage at this show of crash commercialism, promptly said that it would cut off Grant's supply of grain whiskey. And that is beautiful irony, considering the crass commercialism that is Diageo today.
Yeah, that's funny, especially after our last few dives into some of their products and attached with them the sordid affairs that they've been up to. Any dirt on Diageo these days, makes me smile.
It does. It always does. It's always one of the directions I go down when I'm looking into the distilleries that we're going into. So obviously, because that cutting off of the grain whiskey from DCL would have affected the growth of Standfast, they built a new distillery from scratch and quite quickly.
It wasn't. It only took about 9 months, I think, from the day that from ground break to production.
Yeah, and that was in 1963. So they pulled the trigger pretty quickly, and they reckon, well, there's a correlation that because the cutting off of the grain it could also be seen as giving the impetus for the launch of the Glenfiddich Pure Malt, because that happened in the same year.
Okay.
I don't know how true that is, but there's a correlation there. So. But so Girvan continues to provide the grain for Grant's portfolio and for other blenders as well.
Yeah.
And the last little note here on Girvan I've got is that in 1995, the original coffee stills were replaced with new multiple column vacuum still setup.
Okay.
The site was also home to the Ladyburn malt whiskey.
Yeah, Ladyburn, which closed in 68.
Yep.
Oh, no, it closed it was built in 68, closed in 75.
Yep. Yeah, and today it's also home to the Hendrick's Gin plant and the Ailsa Bay Malt Distillery.
Anything from Ladyburn would be highly collectible.
Yeah, it would be. It really would be, because there's zero production of that happening, and I would be surprised if there were plans to reopen it.
Yeah, but either way, that makes this dram belong to the lowland region, basically.
Yes.
It's a lowland product.
Yes,
yep.
It sure is.
Whether it's a lowland style or not, we'll find out.
And we will find out. But so basically both of these whiskies are produced under the same conditions with, as far as I can see, a single exception in the distillation process. So the sea cask is unpeated and the land cask is peated.
I found that an interesting choice of nomenclature. Like for me, the implication of sea cask, it'd make me think of all your brine and your peat, and that might be because of Isla.
And Isla, exactly.
Whilst the land cask, then you'd think there's summer orchards and heather honey.
Exactly. So
perhaps land is a reference to the peat itself.
Yeah, according to the marketing stuff I've read, that is exactly right.
Okay.
So the main difference between the two is one's peated and one's unpeated.
Yeah.
And the secondary difference, and the reason why they're called sea cask and land cask, is that they're both aged in a mix of ex-bourbon and ex-sherry casks.
Yeah.
But some are aged closer to the sea, some are aged closer, further inland.
I'm a skeptic, and I don't reckon that makes a fucking difference.
Well, especially when you understand on reading a little bit further into it that it's really only a difference of a few hundred meters where these casks are aged.
Yeah.
So
I don't care if you aged one in Isla and another one in the friggin' Highlands. Wouldn't matter.
Now, I think that if you... I'm going to disagree with you on that point because Isla is a low...
Hang on. As long as temperature and humidity are consistent in those two places, there is going to be no fucking difference.
I agree with you 100%, but I don't think that I think there would be a difference in temperature,
you bring it to Australia and it's the same temperature and humidity, there will be no fucking difference.
Agreed, as long as you keep those things consistent.
Exactly.
So I can only assume that maybe the sea casks are, but I mean you wouldn't be aging casks outside, so they're they're basically aged at one end
of the warehouse
and the other end of a warehouse.
Yes,
which
exactly.
That's not going to make any fucking difference.
No,
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
That's bullshit.
Yeah, it is. It's utter horseshit.
And so what you're really speaking about, kind of roundabout, when you're discussing this concept of casks being aged, of having a different whiskey in them as a result of where they're aged and where they spend their time, is a form of terroir, right? I'm probably pronouncing that wrong because I'm not French.
Yeah.
Terroir?
To a degree.
Terroir.
Oh, no, sorry. I was talking about like exactly what you said, not how you said it. It's a product of terroir.
And understanding that it's not terroir has a pretty broad definition, which I've got in my notes as well. We'll come back to this at some point.
I think that there's sort of levels of it. It can be all encompassing. To me, it means it's more about the actual malt itself, where that's come from. It's not so much where it's matured. Even though that's could be a facet of it if you wanted to get picky.
And that's it. So when I kind of came across the concept of it, that's the more encompassing use of the term, because it's basically factors that go into the finished product. But realistically, the term comes from the grape world and from wine production, and that is very much all about soil, climate, even which direction the plot faces, different nutrients in the soil, and it's all about the grape itself. So I did a bit of a dive on terroir, which we'll get into a little later.
Sounds like good whiskey banter.
Look, and it is. I found it really interesting. And,
cool.
If I don't find it interesting, I don't dive. So, but I found this quite interesting. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But at first glance, but these two, this looks like a bunch of marketing piss.
For sure. I'll I can go into a little bit on that.
They've created two whiskies. One's peated, one's unpeated. But instead of focusing on the fact that one's peated and one's unpeated, they've decided to focus on the fact that one's aged at one end of a warehouse, one's aged at the other, and I think that makes the distinction.
Well, that's it.
moot.
It might make people then consider more, does where the cask is aged, does that have a bearing on the flavour? So now they're going to think all inland whiskies are peated and sea whiskies.
Which is, I think it's more confusing. They state that they've gone about this to reduce the amount of confusion around whiskey and make it more easy.
I think they're trying. They've focused very narrowly, and they're only considering their own world. They're not looking at the whole sort of whiskey spectrum.
I think this is just a marketing idea that they've run with, and I think it's going to create more confusion than other. And
it can. There's a possibility for that for sure.
Yeah, I'm not for it, to be honest. I mean, me, Rick. I've got very little patience for marketing bullshit, and this just reeks of marketing bullshit, to be honest. But I haven't tasted the whiskey yet, so maybe I'm being overly harsh.
Get to that shortly again. But as you said, it's the Aerstone Whiskies series on their website. They claim to demystify whiskey for beginners.
Yeah.
Their very own Sean Weineman, Global Innovation Brand Manager at William Grant. Fuck me, what a job title.
That's a great job title.
That's
marketing bullshit.
Said the Aerstone range is being launched in response to consumer concerns that single malt Scotch is complex and intimidating. With Aerstone, we want to break down some of those barriers and help simplify single malts, inviting existing malt drinkers and new entrants to learn about all the different flavours and styles of single malt Scotch, he said. And Brian Kinsman, the master blender at William Grant & Sons, said, "We have developed two very different and evocative flavour profiles under the one brand, both inspired by the Scottish environment and the raw elements where we age our whiskey. With a 10-year age statement people can expect a well-rounded single malt whiskey with depth of flavours that will intrigue not only new drinkers but also more experienced single malt enthusiasts. Which is a whole bunch of nothing, just telling us that we've got 2 whiskies out, really.
Yeah, exactly.
And check them out.
It's trying to create cut through.
Yeah.
So they're trying to utilise. There's a lot of new whiskies being brought to market all the time. There is an attention deficit with the consumer base, which we've spoken about at length in regards to social media and things like that. What they're trying to do is create something that appears different, unique, and will cut through the noise and appear, enticing to new whiskey drinkers. And they may well have succeeded in that. I mean, it's hard these days. We've become proper whiskey wankers, right? Like we've just
become over analytical, like
hugely so. I mean, we have a fucking whiskey podcast, so that makes us whiskey wankers by definition.
I guess so. Yeah.
Effectively. So because we've spent a lot of time, we both value our whiskey collections. We value the length and breadth of the conversations that we used to have on a regular basis before we fucking started recording ourselves, doing this. So we've looked into it, we've read about it, so we're not entry level consumer, right? So it's hard to, I would sit there and go, does the entry level consumer really find it intimidating? But maybe they do. I mean, maybe I did, and I just don't remember it. So I don't know.
I think we were young and cocky enough to just go in blindly and just try whatever was affordable at the time.
Exactly.
And then if anyone said, I bought this, and somebody else said, oh yeah, okay, try this then. That's only a few dollars more. I'll save up for that. Check that out. I think it was the Whisky Show 2015 that really blew us open, because you could try everything.
Yes.
And that was a great way.
Everything was available.
Yeah. I reckon that's one of the best. Anyone starting out in whiskey should just go to a whiskey show.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that's hard in current circumstances, but they are successful events, and there will be more of them. So as we start to work,
there's a lot of wankery that goes with it. But
there is, absolutely.
But at the end of the day, it's just drinking it how you like it.
That's it. And part of our MO is to try and cut through some of that wankery because it annoys us. But in the same time, we are also prone to a bit of that wankery because we are who we are, right?
Yeah, it's an echo chamber here.
But so all of the bullshit aside, we've got 2 distinctly different whiskies produced from the same distillery. Now that in itself, I think, is a great starting point, and I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Well, firstly, in a way, it's good marketing. They've convinced you to. Well, if you're going to buy one, you're going to buy both, I think.
Exactly. Exactly.
And really, for a 10-year-old whiskey, they were about $60, I think, each.
Yep.
That is a very, very affordable price.
It is. So it'll come down a bang for buck here,
a lot of my skepticism lies with the fact that when it was released, it was in the UK. It was released in Tesco stores, which is pretty much like putting it in a Coles or an Aldi here. More like a Coles.
Like a Walmart or a...
Yeah, it's Walmart whiskey.
I suppose Coles here, exactly right. Yeah. Or maybe even Aldi.
Yeah, it's kind of like Aldi because you can buy alcohol from Aldi, and Coles and Woolies have like the separate business attached. Yeah.
So, I mean, look.
So yeah, it's basically supermarket whiskey, I think, but it's a good marketing play because it's maximum exposure.
And really. Accessibility. Like this reeks of accessibility, right? They've sat there, they've gone,
They've tried to break it down for you. I just think it's given people a bum steer. It's going to make people in future not try a whole bunch of shit if they base their opinions on what is said on the packaging here.
I think that's a risk. I think it is a risk. And I think it's a good marketing move. They've got one of the biggest brands in single malt whiskey, and now they've got another brand in a supermarket, and that's fucking fantastic accessibility, and it's very affordable. So, but we'll see. We'll give our verdict. So that the name Aerstone is a fictional name fusing the Gaelic word for air and the word stone, which denotes the earth. I don't know. Maybe they should have gone sea and stone, sea and earth.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm hugely on it, but it's. I suppose we should probably give it a crack at.
Yeah, let's hook in.
Where do you want to start?
I guess probably with the C, if the C is going to be the non-peated one.
Cool.
Which is,
For a 10-year-old supermarket whiskey, it's got a nice robe on it.
You reckon? I'm not getting anything here.
Yeah,
I'm barely
which
getting
glass
anything.
are you using?
You're using a Glencairn, it might, who knows, it might be the condition as a Glencairn. Yeah. It could be the lighting in here. No, I'd say average. Could be the cleanliness of the glass.
Yeah, I've got brand new glasses, so...
Okay. It's got a nice aroma, though. I love that.
It does. It's quite sweet.
Yeah, very nice honey. The lighter end of honey.
Yeah, very spay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Less of a sting than I expect
not
for a
as
10-year-old.
rich as a spay. Definitely not in colour either.
No, she's quite pale gold.
Which, looking at the land cask, I've got the 2 bottles next to me. Looking at the land cask, it is a bit more rich in colour, but I read somewhere it was a great way to describe it. Was bottled at 40%, so it's more than likely wearing a little fake tan, alluring to the fact that it's got some caramel colouring in it. That was by Phil at maltreview.com.
Nice.
I like that. Yeah, that reference, fake tan.
So she's quite floral on the nose.
She's nice on the nose. A lot of people bitch at this term that they've used, how it's smooth and easy. They've basically picked 2 words that don't really mean anything, or they're...
No. Yeah, I agree. Smooth is usually... I mean, I suppose it's most commonly referred to well-aged whiskies, right? I mean,
you'd expect them to be smoother, but what is...
Exactly.
To me, being smooth is that it doesn't really hurt on the way down.
Yeah, fair enough. That's what I would use as well. I think I'm looking for more like words like creamy to describe texture and
the way that it makes your mouth feel.
Yeah, exactly. Smooth is more lack of bite.
Exactly.
Lacking those rough edges of a no-age state.
But then there's things that you can attribute to smooth, like a caramel flavour, or even that creamy flavour. You'd call all them smooth. Yeah,
exactly right. But I'm picking up...
You having trouble keeping it up, mate?
Yeah, she's... I'm getting old. Getting old, brother.
That's what ISO does to you, mate.
But I'm picking up some apricot and some... Is there a bit of tropical fruit in there?
Loving that rich brown sugar and honey. Yeah,
it's a real nice, almost a true honey to it, as opposed to the heather.
It smells like slightly watered down honey.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's kind of
there's a freshness to it as well.
Yeah,
you could almost say a little bit of citrusy zing on the high end.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of cereal to it, but it's mostly sweet and fruity on the nose, I reckon.
A lot of bite to it. The smooth, I wouldn't call that smooth. That is that's almost
smooth isn't the first word.
That's almost like chili on the tongue.
Yeah, smooth is not the first word I'd use on the first sip.
No. I just had enough to wet my mouth. It's got some nice legs now, but it was thin and fucking hot. But it didn't burn on the way down, and it's left a nice sort of creamy, but you can also taste like the oaky, the tannin youth.
Yeah, there's a real black pepper spice to the finish, isn't there?
Yeah.
And that lingers, that peppery bite.
Yeah, it's quite square. It's a very square whiskey, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Pretty thin. Nothing about it's super offensive except for the youth, the ethanol, like rawness of it.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, there is... Yeah, that pepper is...
It's pretty dominant, eh?
The predominant... It's very predominant. There's a little bit of... I mean, that fruit does kind of come on, but it's very subdued on the tongue. There's maybe a touch of, again, subdued butterscotch.
Yeah, everything's being flattened by that pepper. Any sort of, all those sweet, like the butterscotches, the honeys, your caramels, treacles, all that sort of, that spectrum is just being beat down by that pepper.
And big time beat down. Like, it's not subtle, that pepper. It's not subtle at all. It's...
it can be in very, very small amounts. It is pretty smooth on the way down. It's weird for something to burn the tongue more than the esophagus.
And that's exactly what it's doing. It's the... It's sitting on the tongue. All aspects of the tongue and the back of the roof of the mouth as well. There's that, and now it's not horrendous, but it's dominant. You know, there is this black pepper spice that lingers over everything, subduing everything, but it is reasonably, for lack of a better term, smooth on the way down. Right?
Yeah.
There's no real alcohol burn to it. It's just this kind of pepper spice.
But then you're left with a load of spice and a bit of a putrid finish. The longer that it goes on, it gets quite rancid.
Yeah, agreed.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this isn't getting very many points at all.
No, look, it's it's underwhelming. It's really underwhelming, and it's not the fact that it's unpeated. It's just that pepper is so dominant that I don't think I'd pour this for someone, you know?
Nah. You do it if you're having a whiskey day, if you're hosting a festival for your mate of sorts. If you
As a comparison point, maybe.
So, yeah, exactly.
As a comparison point, maybe, but you know, you wouldn't serve it to them to say, hey, enjoy this.
Yeah, come back to my place for a drink. This isn't what you're going to pour up by any means.
No, it's not. Yeah, I find it distinctly underwhelming.
Yeah. I'll go on to a few notes. There's not much information out there, and probably fucking rightly so. I've devoted way too much time to it already.
Agreed.
Yeah, the website notes are, it's carefully matured for over 10 years in warehouses perched on the intense environs of the Ayrshire coast of Scotland. Sea Cask is so called because some of our warehouses are situated right by the sea. This impacts the maturation process and delivers a smooth whiskey with a hint of sea salt. I'm calling bullshit on 2 counts there.
Yeah,
where it says impacts the maturation and also with a hint of sea salt. Both of those points utter horseshit. Sea Cask features a combo of ex-bourbon barrel and ex-sherry casks, matured spirit for a Speyside style of scotch.
Yeah, I detect no salt there. It's not even a salt and pepper whiskey. It's a pepper whiskey. And I don't even think it's distinctly Spey.
As a note, I did find something here. I'll pick it apart, but it says... Oh, where is it? Somewhere salt is a compound. There we go, yeah. As a compound, salt has never been found in any single malt. I'd understand if the alcohol like breaks it down and it's no longer salt anymore, but you probably find elements of sodium and chlorine. I don't know if they'd still combine to taste salty on their own. Who knows? I'm not a fucking chemist. But I just think, aging it near the sea is kind of bullshit.
I just can't see it. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know, because there is definitely, oh, pardon me, in those maritime whiskies that we love so much, there is a distinct salt.
And I think they capture. They capture that other ways. It's not about where it's matured.
They must, because there's certainly.
I would say that the peat for a start lends itself to that saltiness from all the Isla,
which will be interesting. Maybe there'll be more salt. Yeah, maybe there'll be more salt.
Anything malted at Port Ellen from Isla peat is just inherently salty.
Yeah, and that's fair. I've got a little bit here on Ailsa Bay Distillery itself. Ailsa Bay, so they've run. So it's kind of a new distillery. I think 2007.
It's 2009. I think I said Charlie came and opened it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. There you go. Different sources, different notes. People are wrong.
It might have started. Groundbreaking might have started in 2007, and it was completed in 2009. Might have started.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But so they go to. So the first thing I want from the distillery was the Ailsa Bay Release 1.2 Sweet Smoke, and they go about it in a very data-driven way in Ailsa Bay. Now, it's. The whiskey they're producing under the Ailsa Bay brand is the only single malt to be assessed by both peat parts per million and a new measure that's been developed by maltmaster Brian Kinsman, sweet parts per million.
Yeah, right.
So now that kind of sounds like a little bit marketing bullshit.
No, I think this has got legs, actually.
So apparently the SPPM is the precise measurement of sweet levels in the whiskey, but it's not measuring the sweetnesses in sugar, like a brick-style measure might do, because there isn't any sugar in distilled whiskey. The SPPM measures the oak-derived compounds that are responsible for the perceived sweetness of a whiskey. So this is apparently a first of its kind, this scientific measurement. Yeah. They also go about things a little bit differently with micro-maturation. So instead of cask finishing, Malt Master Brian Kinsman has flipped it on its head. Quote, for Ailsa Bay, the result is a process called cask starting. The new make spirit goes into a small ex-Hudson Baby bourbon barrel of between 25 and 100 litres for a period of 1 to 3 years before going then into either first fill or virgin American oak or refill American oak cask for aging. So I'm reading that again out loud. I'm not sure if it makes as much sense as it did when I read it the first time. But so it's supposedly something about giving the whiskey more surface area to make contact with in that
so
first,
to give the illusion
process
of being aged longer.
Yeah,
it's got more
to have more interaction.
It's aged longer. Yeah,
correct. Yeah, it's got more interaction with the wood in that early first 1 to 3 years. But so that it says here that then during the distillation itself, Maltmaster Brian Kinsman fine-tunes the rate of distillation, slowing it down so that lighter, higher compounds come through earlier to capture the heavier phenols in the spirit. He adjusts the reflux within the still, and he describes it as distilling right on. Oh, nope. I've not got the next page of that quote.
Someone ripped the last page out of your novel.
So I would assume that because these are the guys that are responsible for this whiskey. So I would assume that this is part of their playground. Yeah, that they're really playing on a scientific basis with Ailsa Bay, and I think that we could potentially be looking forward to some different releases coming from the same distillery, but and I hope that they are more impressive than the one we've tasted so far, just between you and me.
Well, on that note, did you want to move on to the
very much so
land cask?
Now, on first impressions,
it's got a beautiful caramelly peatness to it.
It really does, that peat, and it's important to note that this is Highland peat, not Isla peat.
And I think you can smell the difference already because of the more caramelly sugary as opposed to like the lemony sherbet.
Yes, yeah. An interesting note that I came across, and it makes me interested to do a Highland Park episode.
That's one of the ones. I've got the 10, I believe, so we should invest. Yeah, we should get around to that.
Because the Highland Park cut the peat from their own peat fields.
Awesome.
And
sweet.
Their Highland peat fields.
Well, that's the Balvenie week of peat. That's the same thing.
Exactly right. Yep. So they think, and I don't know. I've never spent time with Highland Park, but apparently it's a much sweeter, heathery kind of peat due to the because as we know, peat is decomposed. Vegetable
as we said,
matter.
It's on its way to being coal. It's
exactly
one of the early stages of a diamond, if you want to think about it.
And so because of the type of vegetation in that particular area is mostly heather and low-lying scrub as opposed to trees. So apparently the characteristic of the peat is quite different. So
for sure.
I'd be interested in going down that rabbit hole with Highland Park. But
you could also do like a Orkney Island episode with them and their flagship and Scalper as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But
people should anything you want to see, people let us know. Anything you want to see or hear, they should.
Absolutely.
Info at livingthedram.com, Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find us on Facebook. Just livingthedram.com.au, and then look at all the social media links on the side. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Let us know what you want to hear.
Absolutely. By all means, get in touch with us and let us know. We're happy to go down any rabbit hole.
Yeah. Your very expensive rabbit hole.
Yeah. Now, I don't know. I think the robe on this is comparable. Maybe, I don't know. Do you think it's as good, or do you think it's better or worse, Rickus?
I don't know. I don't think either of them were terribly impressive.
No, look, I mean,
it could be the condition of my glasses. Yeah.
Yeah, these
actually,
are
this one looks. This one looks kind of nice. It's got a nice aesthetic. I don't know if it actually means fucking a thing.
No, yeah, true. But it certainly smells.
Smells more inviting. Yeah, earthier, richer.
Yep, there's that. I mean, obviously we're predisposed to love peat,
from my preferential point of view, it smells far more inviting.
Yeah, agreed.
But the other one still had a far better nose than palate and finish.
Agreed. Yeah, very, very much so. This is kind of reminiscent of bonfire and char and like that smell the next day after you've had a bonfire. And it's gone out, and you've woken up the next morning, and it's there's just that permeating of the air.
I get it heaps. It's still in my hair. I can smell it for fucking days if I don't wash it.
Yeah, this smells more inviting, I think.
Yeah. You can taste that it's from the same process, you can tell they're a family in a way on the finish. The finish is the same. It has that weird bitterness. That's almost the bitterness. It turns quite foul after a while.
But it's much nicer on the palate.
Yeah, it is more inviting. I wonder if that peat is killing a lot of what's foul about it. Yeah,
that black pepper spice is still there on the finish, along with the char and the peat, but it's not.
It's nowhere near as unless we've already sort of conditioned our tongue to. Actually, now's a good time to go back to the sea.
That's a really good call.
Yeah, it's much lighter. It's much lighter, like in its sugar, sort of in the sweet end.
That second sip of the land, it is way earthier. There's kind of a tarry, bottom end, almost stickiness to it. But the pepper is still very, very subdued until you get to the finish. And then it is the predominant thing on the finish.
And then there's that high-end bitterness that comes with the finish that just goes foul if you don't keep drinking the whiskey.
Oh, no, I don't think we've conditioned our tongues, because going back to the sea, it is still all black pepper and spice.
Okay, I found it a little bit smoother. Like I said, the high-end sweetness is higher than it is in the Land Cask. Land Cask is quite inviting on the nose, and it's pretty nice on the palate, but they both have terrible finishes.
Yeah, it's not the finish I want, but it's a far more palatable whiskey.
Yeah. Out of the two of them, I think the Land definitely rates higher.
And at the price point, I mean, if I'm at someone's place and they've turned around and gone, "Hey, I've just bought these whiskeys. Would you like one?" I'm definitely choosing the Land.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm not going into a rage at the fact that that's all they've got to offer me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll be disappointed, but that's because I'm a wanker. So I'm going to be way more predisposed to choose the Land over the sea. Absolutely, without a doubt.
It's not too bad. I'd still say, for a very similar price point, I'd say shell out another $5 or $6 and buy a Glenfiddich 12.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's, as we know, that's Rickus's bang for buck. Mm-hmm. And that's a well worth episode going back and having a listen to, ladies and gents. And feel free to let us know your opinion after hearing ours. But I don't think I'd recommend either of these whiskies to someone up and coming. I mean, the Glenfiddich is. It's a good
if you want to show somebody an example of peat, it's not terrible for that. The Land Cask is not terrible for that.
Look, it's not, but you would still. I mean, I'm gonna send them towards the Lagavulin 16-year-old because it's the king of Islay whiskies.
True.
But even if they don't want to spend that much, I'm gonna point them in the direction of the Lafroig 10 as an entry point for peat, because I think that should be your entry point for peat. I think this is. There's many better options to introduce someone to peated whiskey. I don't see myself recommending either of these whiskies to anyone.
I'm not going to recommend them, but it's not like I'm not going to offer them.
Yeah, well, you're only going to offer them to get rid of your stock, though, right? And look, let's be honest. The differences between these whiskies is not where they're aged. It is not either end of the warehouse that's contributing.
Well, they say
it's the fact that
they say about the Land Cask that further inland, our whiskies mature in warehouses where the sea has less of an influence on the flavour. These whiskies here are the use of Highland peat and are therefore rich and smoky in character. Same mix of ex-bourbon and sherry aged spirit. It's basically the same spirit, different peat, aged at different ends of the warehouse. And I think too much credence is given to the location to be a factor in why they taste so different.
Huge. I mean, like, there is the tiniest little bit of salt to go with that pepper on the Land Cask. If I'm, and maybe I'm imagining it, but there's no salt in the Sea Cask, and I think there's a small amount of salt in the Land Cask. So,
and that's the saltiness I think that we attribute to peat. Peat brings a certain salty.
Agreed. So I think they're misleading. Maybe not intentionally, but I don't think you can give any credence to the fact that they're aged 150 or 300 meters apart. I don't know how large the warehouse lot is.
I don't reckon you're too far off the money though. Pretty bloody big shed.
So this brings me to what I was talking about earlier, terroir. In encompassing, like as in all the different impacts that make the whiskey. And as I said earlier, that it's more a wine term that goes into the components that make the fruit, because wine is so fruit driven. Whiskey is not barley driven. I've got a definition here for terroir, and it is: terroir is the three-dimensional impact of soil, microclimate, and topography on the growth of a plant. In the case of malt whiskey, that plant is barley, the very source of whiskey's flavour complexity. Now, most of the barley produced for the whiskey industry is produced for consistency and efficiency, because they use so much of it and they produce so much of it. So whiskey is not a barley-driven drink, and there are those that would sit there and say that barley produces the least.
Nothing is heroed about the barley on any of the packaging or any of the marketing ever, and that's why I believe
exactly.
Yeah, and it could be a circular argument where it was never believed that barley deserved that kind of limelight.
And whiskey, as opposed to wine, which strives for, now consistency is something that is important to wine producers, but it is still, the fruit is the hero, and it is what sets each different vineyard apart. You're paying for that lot on a particular vineyard,
exactly,
as opposed to that brand in itself, right? You're paying for Penfolds Lot 35 as opposed to Penfolds. The Grange is all about those particular lots and the age of the vines. It's all about the soil, the climate. Whereas whiskey, they are searching far more for absolute consistency, so that every bottle of Glenfiddich 12-year-old is the same as the previous one.
The dream, for such a large output.
Exactly right. Yeah. So there are those that think that the distillation process itself is what attains that consistency, but there are those that think that micro distilling should be a thing, and that people should be looking at celebrating the flavour of the barley itself more. Now, one of those people is Mark Rainier, who is the CEO of Waterfords, which is a distillery in Ireland that is all about doing... so they've been experimenting under scientific conditions to see what influence terroir can have on barley when it's explored as opposed to ignored, as it were. Now, Rainier he was the head of Brookladdock Distillery for 11 years. And Brookladdock have kind of done some work into terroir, but he wanted to branch out and do something that really focused on it. So he created Waterfords, and they worked with a PhD, a barley scientist at Oregon State University, Dustin Herb. What a great name! He's a I'm a barley scientist.
What you doing, man? Dustin Herb.
Yeah, I do love the fact that he's a plant scientist whose last name is Herb. That's fantastic.
Is that determinative nominativism?
Thank you for reminding me of. I couldn't remember. It is. Yes, nominative determinism is such a good phrase.
Why is it nominative determinism rather than determinative nominism?
I suppose because it's it's determined by the nomination as opposed to nominated by the determination.
That was a really good answer. It's like when someone asks, how long's a piece of string? I always say twice the length from the middle to the end.
Spot on. Yeah. So the basically where they've come from is that historically barley's been selected based on high yield capabilities and flavour neutrality, because that's the best for commercial production.
Sure.
But and I'm just going to read quickly here. This is all a quote from an article. For Waterford's academic project, 2 barley varieties, Olympus and Laureate, were sown in replication at 2 distinct sites in southeast Ireland near the small towns of Athy and Bunclody, and harvested during 2017. In Athy, the soil is nutritionally richer, specifically in calcium, phosphorus, magnesium and zinc, than the soil in Bunclody. The malting, brewing, distilling protocols remained identical for all samples in order to achieve the objective of being able to identify environment-induced flavours. The team performed small lab-scale brewing and distillation of the malt samples according to standardised industry specifications. All sensory assessments were made on new make spirit, and sensory data was collected on panellist evaluations and the latest in mass spectrum gas chromatography. The full results are being submitted for 2 peer-reviewed publications later this year and again in early 2021. So this was from an article in 2020. Mm-hmm. The results at this point are that terroir happens to be perfectly demonstrable. Environmental differences in whiskey
I'm not surprised, man.
Present.
Like, you are what you eat.
Sensory analysis. Exactly right. You know, it's
so of course the elements, the differences in the soil from here to there are gonna. That's what your plant is consuming. That's what your barley is consuming. It's gonna have different. It's gonna use different elements, like the abundance of different elements in different ways.
Absolutely.
I don't.
So just to complete the paragraph, sensory analysis indicated that the Athy site provided higher fruit and malt flavours compared to Bunclody, which was higher in green, grassy, mineral notes. Mm-hmm. Now, what that suggests, or probably definitively proves, is that there is far greater implication. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I think we're all understanding that the characteristics of the whiskey you love come down to the distillation process of the distillers and the casks that they use.
I would say that, and there's a very high percentage of the factor determined by the type of cask you use.
Oh, probably the majority.
Yes, yeah, that's also a very high percentage.
Yeah, so
I'd go as far to say 85 to 90% of what you're tasting is down to the cask.
I think that's probably true, but you again, I think you could use the same casks for 2 different distilleries, and the distillation process is probably contributing a little bit more than we give credit for, right?
Yeah.
Because the different cut points, the different maltings. I mean, obviously, one of the massive factors is whether it's peated or unpeated malting. Yeah. So that's having a massive impact.
Also, I think your water source. I think your water source is one of the most sort of under considered things here.
Texture-wise, I think you're right.
Yeah, but waters have heaps of different minerals in them.
Agreed.
So that's going to contribute
to the interaction.
Yeah,
like I think the main. Yeah, that's going to contribute to your main interaction.
If you wanted to get down to like an ultimate level of wankery, you could say like, oh yeah, my ideal Scotch uses fucking Isla peat and it uses water from this source, and the grain from this source.
I can give you a legitimate example.
Mm-hmm.
My ideal whiskey would use Isla peat with grain probably from Isla. So grain from Isla malted in Isla using Isla peat, but using the water source from Springbank, because I love that oily Campbelltown texture that comes from the water.
Are you sure that that's from the water?
That's from what I gather.
Okay.
That the oily texture that is quite unique to Campbelltown malts comes from the water sources and the mineral content of the water sources there. Now, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I just outright don't know. Yeah.
If someone knows more about this, by all means, please throw a comment down and lead me down a new rabbit hole. I'm always up for that. But I think what we can definitively state, based on research and personal experience, is that where you put the cask is going to have the absolute least amount of influence over the flavour of the whiskey. That's
kind of where I went. I read a brilliant article ages ago, and I was disappointed that I can't find it. But a lot of, from what I remember reading a few years back, a lot of whiskies aren't aged where you think they would be aged. They're not aged on site. And when you think about it, all the whiskey that could be aging in Islay would fucking cover the entire of Islay. Like all the Islay whiskey, yeah. So yeah, I'll go through a bit on what I found there, which was basically how much of an effect do the external microclimate factors impart on a whiskey. Changing weather conditions over the seasons also influence maturation, with warm weather raising the temperature of the spirit, causing it, along with the wood's pores, to expand and allowing the spirit to steep further into the wood. And conversely, cold weather makes the wood pause and the spirit contract, and the temperature-induced interactions between wood and spirit are known as cycles. In reality, much of the spirit produced at Scotland's whisky distilleries is taken by tanker to be filled into vast central warehouses such as Diageo's Black Grange bonding near Alloa, which alone holds about 6 million casks.
Fuck me.
This arrangement makes life easier, especially if you're a blender, and it's certainly more cost effective. Simon Erlinger, the managing director of Isle of Harris Distillers, says, if you're one of the larger brands where consistency is important, then the marriage of many different casks for a bottling will most likely mask most of the effect of a distillery's location. Added to that, with maturation warehouses often in different locations, then where it's matured becomes less relevant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Nick. Hi, everybody.
I'm Dr. Nick.
Everybody, this is Dr. Nick Morgan, Head of Whisky Outreach, Diageo. In Diageo, we're currently maturing over 9 million casks across 3 dedicated warehouse sites, regardless of their specific location, whether by the sea on the west coast, by the sea at Leven, or a few dozen miles from the Firth of Forth. All 3 share Scotland's maritime climate. After years of research, we believe the exact site of maturation warehouse makes no discernible difference to the whisky. Romantics might cling to the notion that maturation at distilleries imparts some special flavour or character to the maturing whisky, but the facts say otherwise. And as those once noble whisky bonds demonstrate, whiskies have been matured in central locations for generations. There's a lot of hogwash talk of storm-tossed distilleries and their whisky casks breathing in the salty air. As I said before, as a compound, salt has never been found in any single malt. And in terms of aesthetics, as Morgan suggests, it would be unthinkable to cover Islay with enough warehouses to mature all its whisky.
Yeah. So basically, it's all fucking bullshit.
Mm-hmm. I wish I could find this other article that definitively proved it. It said certain brands, going where they actually took them to. Because if they're producing and they broke it down and they're producing this much, their warehouse holds this much, like, how can they have 30? How can they have 30-year-old whiskey in there?
Yeah. So if you can find it, we'll link it obviously in the show notes. But the other thing that I want to point out is that realistically, the only 3 ingredients in whiskey is barley, water, and yeast, and the yeast is imparting a lot of that flavour. As well. So in the US, the importance of yeast in influencing the flavour is way more appreciated. They've got proprietary strains. And if you go to any bourbon distillery in Kentucky,
genetically modified yeast.
There'll be a historical story about their proprietary yeast strain. And it's the job, like in each, when a bourbon distillery opens, it's the job of usually a scientist hired for that particular job to find a proprietary yeast strain that then becomes the single yeast strain that they use for everything. So there is a lot of factors that go into the flavour. And you got to remember, the reason that Scotch whisky is the most complex spirit in the world, and I stand by that. That's not a claim I make. That's an accepted industry claim. Is because it's barley. It's barley that it uses. So I think we'll see in the future more of this micro, smaller scale distilleries where they're focusing on not consistency, but almost like a wine.
Batch to batch.
Yeah,
There is a lot of
vintage.
that happening now. Like look at Dan and Highwayman.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly
right.
what he's doing. A lot of the Tasmanians that have single casks that I have is like that's actually more common than not, rather than a consistent 10-year-old.
And I think that's fantastic. I mean, I don't. There will always be whiskies that I go to because I expect them to be like the last whiskey I had. Lagavulin 16. The reason it's my favourite whiskey is because I love everything that makes that whiskey that whiskey.
It's reliable it's reliable as fuck as well.
That's it. It makes me happier than most other whiskies. Now there are better whiskies out there, absolutely, but it is the things that make Lagavulin 16 the thing that makes it my first reach and my first pour. So I will always appreciate that about certain whiskies, but realistically, I absolutely would love to see this movement toward more terroir-based, vintage to vintage, batch to batch whiskies, because I think there's a beautiful romanticism to it that appeals to me.
Yeah, I agree as well.
I don't need...
It also is an added layer of wankery that the whiskey industry completely does not fucking need.
Look, it doesn't need... I mean...
There's enough wankery already. Our wankery quota is full, so move along here.
Yeah, so true. But I just think it's really interesting, and I think that we often do forget the impact that the barley itself has, because we go to such great lengths in the whiskey industry to disguise it and to focus on that cask maturation being the predominant factor, which it is. I'm not disagreeing with that, but as far as the whole cask aging factor, I call fucking utter bullshit.
Yeah.
I call it ridiculous market speak. I'm not interested in it. I think it's fucking doing more harm than good, and I'm not a fan of the concept. I'm not a fan of the whiskies, and it's these aren't winners.
Do you want to put your money where your mouth is and give us some numbers then?
Yeah, look.
Have you tried any water yet?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay, I have been a bit to softened them very nicely. My money is still on the Land Cask if you're going to pick either of them there.
Oops. Yep, I just put way too much water in both of those because I lack
the Land Cask becomes quite nice when you find the sweet spot to get rid of that shitty, or prolong the shitty bitterness on the finish. It's still kind of there. Gets a really smooth sweetness about it. It's more rich than the Sea Cask. The Sea actually has more of that. You would say it's lighter, saltier, a bit more citrusy than the rich and smokiness of the Land Cask.
Yeah, even overwatered down. That black pepper spice is so predominant on the Sea Cask that, if given the choice, I wouldn't drink it.
I think it's more high-end white pepper for me. It's got more of a fresher, grassier kind of, in comparison, when you're comparing the two, they're the spectrums that they both lean to for mine. I got a number.
Yeah, it's unkind.
Yeah,
but I'm really, really, really unimpressed with these, especially for 10-year-olds. The marketing bullshit's going to contribute because it pisses me off, and they're going to be victim of my anger at the same time. I'm giving the Sea Cask 51, and I'm giving the Land Cask 52.
Yeah, right. I was kind of all over the shop, and I've jumped as low as sort of your 3.5s, and I've gone as high as sort of 5.2 in my head.
Yeah, right. So I thought I can't imagine giving a whiskey less than 50. I just can't imagine it because it's whiskey.
I was shooting from the hip a bit. They're not fucking terrible, that's for sure.
They are. They're terrible.
I would see terrible for me would get a 3. I've got to be a bit kinder than that. I'll say the Sea Cask gets maybe a 4.8 or a 48, and you're kind of right with the Land Cask, sitting around I probably enjoyed it a little bit more than you. I'd give it a 54.
Having just finished that sea cask, I don't think I can give it above 50. I'm going to give it a 49.
Okay.
Because that is the lowest I can give.
Well, I just gave it a 4.8.
Yeah. 49 and 51 is going to be my split.
Yeah, cool. I'll sit, 48 and 54. I don't mind. The land cask is definitely the pick out of the two. A bit of water. It's not too bad.
Yeah.
The finish on both are fucking terrible. Mic drop.
Yeah, they're bad. I'm not going to drink them again.
Might be able to make some decent cocktails out of these, really. It'd be interesting to make the same cocktail, actually, and with both different styles. Honestly,
I mean, I don't even think Coke would improve these.
No, I'd make a nice, fuck a whiskey and Coke, make like a whiskey sour using both whiskeys, and you see if you can pick up the difference. It's I have a feeling it's more like a whiskey. It's sort of a high end mixer. This thing would be perfect for.
I'd like to see you do a little video.
Okay.
Of making a whiskey sour out of these two.
All right, let's fucking do it. I've got plenty of time.
I'd like to do it. I'd like to do it with you.
Holidays in ISO coming up.
Look, I'd like to do it with you, but at the moment we're in ISO.
I could leave another couple. Bring those bottles around. Leave them on the doorstep. I'll refill them.
Yeah, sick. All right, we might do a little ISO special.
ISO, yeah.
With these, maybe we'll tie it into the next episode, because I think the next few episodes we're going to do will be ISO episodes. Just to give a little context for those listening from overseas.
It's the 42nd wave here in New South Wales.
Yeah, we're in week 8 of hard lockdown. That is, and anyone listening or watching in Australia and especially New South Wales, we feel for you. We're going through it ourselves. We watched the rest of the world kind of go through this and felt pretty fucking...
We sort of laughed and pointed our fingers, and now we're getting what we deserve.
We were a little bit fucking... What's the...
Lax?
La Fage or something. I don't know. I don't speak French.
Oh, laissez-faire. Laissez-faire.
That's the one. Laissez-faire. We were a little bit like that, and now we're feeling the heat a little bit, because we have the least effective state government in the country.
I don't want to get into politics. This show should
we're not a political show, so we'll probably edit that bit out. But in all, our next few episodes will probably be ISO episodes, so we'll continue working on our craft in that respect. But feel free to drop us a line, tell us what you'd like to see us do next. It always helps that if you enjoy watching or listening to us, tell someone about us. Hit that like or subscribe button, and have a
review on iTunes, a review on Spotify. Yeah. We'd love you for it.
Yeah, visit the website. There's a bunch of cool shit going on the website. Rick put a huge amount of work into it. We do everything ourselves, which probably shows, but we appreciate any support, any feedback. We do this because we fucking love to do it, and we'll continue to do it whether you like it or not. But feel free to get in touch. We welcome that. That'd be really cool as we continue to develop our craft. But once again, Rick, it's been a fucking pleasure to
Likewise.
do this with you.
It's weird. It's weird. You're not in the same room, but we're doing it the best we can. It wasn't.
We are.
We'll
continue to do it.
It stopped being strange very quickly.
Yeah, amen. And as much as I'd love to fucking clink glasses with you, we'll do this instead.
You've got... okay. Yeah.
It is such a special sound. So yeah, sláinte, my brother. And
cheers, fucker.
We'll do it again soon.
Adios.